Good morning and welcome to Coffee and the Word. So we've been working through the book of Genesis, and I was just thinking about this story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I was wondering how I wanted to tackle it today. And I got to thinking about something. Have you ever been given good advice that was really hard to heed? Think about it for a second. I'll give you some really good advice that's really hard to heed. If you're on a really tall platform, or if you're hanging by a thread and somebody gives you this advice, whatever you do, don't look down, right? That's really good advice that's really hard to heed. Something similar happens in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The angels who had come to visit Lot and his wife and his daughters had come in and said, y'all need to flee the city, and on your way out of the city, you need to go and you need to do one thing. Here's the thing I want you to do, because this place is going to be destroyed, and whatever you do, don't look back. That's really good advice, because he says if you look back, you'll be swept into it. And don't look back is an interesting piece of advice, because I think it's good advice for us in general. In fact, Jesus suggests something very similar. He tells us that no one who puts his hand to the plow looking backwards is fit for the kingdom of heaven. Another place, Jesus uses this word, remember Lot's wife. And so let's talk before we read the story about why someone would dare to look back. And I know in our society, when we read this story, there's something that has to come to mind. Have you ever been driving on the interstate and there is an accident on the other side? You're headed north. There's a wreck on the southbound side. What happens to the northbound traffic? It all slows down. Why? Because there's danger? No. Why? Because they're trying to be respectful of maybe emergency services? No. They're looking because we love to see chaos. It's almost as if we can't help ourselves. We have to look at it's the train wreck thing. We have to look. We need to see what's happening. And so there is this natural tendency among us to want to see what is happening. We love to look into that. But I think the story of Lot's wife is supposed to illustrate something a little different for us. And this concept of not looking back is don't desire to go back to what once was. So let's talk a little bit about what was happening in Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah was so wicked that the scripture says the cries of the wickedness had reached his ears, and he went down to check things out. It was so wicked that when the angels went in to tell Lot, the men of the town came in to be with them, to have sex with them. This place was a wicked, wicked place. And I hate to tell you this, but there's something alluring about wickedness. There's something that draws us in. There's something enticing and fun about wickedness. And you understand this. It's why we say things like you get caught in sin. Like, you can't get caught in something that doesn't have some sort of an appeal to it. And so here's what we're seeing here is in Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot and his family had become very used to the culture. Like the wickedness, I'm sure they noticed it, and I'm sure there were some things that made their stomach turn. But for the most part, they had probably assimilated to the culture around them. And so now they've been given this opportunity to be rescued, and the angels tell Lot and his family, he's like, you need to take off, you need to head out, and whatever you do, don't look back. And that's what happens in our own life. And in fact, I think it's really good advice in our own life. We have a tendency to look back a lot. You hear phrases like the good old days. You ever hear that? Back in my day. We especially, old men tend to do this. I know, because I've become one. Back in my day, we would have never allowed that. back in my day, we would have been able to do all kinds of things. Back in my day, the good old days. And we have this tendency to believe that something in the past is greater than something in the future. And here's the cool thing about our relationship with God. The thing he has prepared for us in the future is greater than anything we've experienced in the past. The thing that God has for us in our future is greater than anything that we've experienced in our past. And so the story of Lot's wife looking back and becoming a pillar of salt is really akin to this whole concept of us wanting to look backwards at what once was, yearning for a better day. And the scripture is pretty plain as we go through it. You know, Paul says in Philippians, he says, this one thing I know is that I'm going to forget what's behind and I'm going to strain what is ahead. Backwards can lead to a lot of trouble. We can look back and we become disappointed with our past. We can become affected by our past. We can become hindered by our past. And I think it's okay for us to remember things to propel us forward, but oftentimes we get stuck there. We get stuck in our glory days sometimes. We get stuck in the times, we'll get around our friends and we'll reminisce about things that, to be honest with you, we would blush about in today's world. And I really believe that's the moral of this story is Lot's wife wasn't looking back to see what was happening. Lot's wife was looking back in a yearning desire to return to what once was. And I think you see that as how it plays out. And I think sometimes we do that. And so I want to encourage you that our focus as children of God ought to be looking forward to what God is going to do today, what God is going to do tomorrow. We ought to have a great anticipation of the promises of God being fulfilled in an even greater way. That there's all kinds of things that are back there that may be valuable, but there are far more things that are before us that are great or of a greater value. And so as you go through your life today, I want to encourage you, try to keep your attention and your focus on what God is doing, not what you have done. Don't look back. That's why Jesus says when the guy comes to him, he's like, I want to come follow you, but first I need to go say goodbye to all my people. And he says, no one who puts their hand to the plow looking backward is fit for the kingdom of heaven. And Paul says, I'm forgetting what's behind and I'm straining what is forward. There is way too much for us to go forward to do, for us to spend any time reflecting on what we've left behind. And so I want to encourage you today to stop dwelling on your past, whether it's longingly or reluctantly or believing that it's the thing that has shaped you today. God has got something greater ahead for you. Pursue that. Desire that. Go after it with every fiber of your being. Stop looking back. You may be filled with regret back there. Stop looking back. You may be filled with all kinds of joy back there. Stop looking back. Let's look forward. The promises that God has for us, they are so wonderful that we don't have time to focus on where we've been because we've got so many things to prepare for to go where we're going. I hope this helps. I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. This has been another edition of Coffee and the Word. God bless you guys.